Hi, I'm Les Wilson. Welcome to the BocaFirst Bike Advocacy Channel. In this series, we profile different cyclists that use Boca Raton's cycling infrastructure. Today with me is a special guest. Jim Wood is a longtime cyclist. He's competed in long distance events in New Jersey, Arizona, and Florida. And at 80 years old, he's really seen everything. He knows a lot, and he's pretty much the go-to guy when it comes to cycling in Boca. Now, Jim has a lot of experience on A1A. So, Jim, thanks for coming on the channel.
Thanks for having me.
So, tell us about A1A and the things about it that you like, and why do so many cyclists love to ride it?
Well, I think it's one of the best venues in Florida. It's safe and it's enjoyable. And I think those two components have to go together. The safety comes in, it's a 35 mile an hour speed limit, relatively narrow lanes, just two-way traffic that tends to slow down motorists. Good bike lanes. The fact that there's a lot of cyclists out there tends to make it safer. Motorists are more aware of cyclists if there's a lot out there. And I think that's one of the big draws of people coming out there. Relative to the enjoyment part, you're riding along the ocean, beautiful views, a lot of trees, green grass, and also in the Barrier Island, it tends to be a little cooler in the summer, a little warmer in the winter, which is really nice. So you put all that together and you can see why people go out there and ride.
So one of the things you mentioned to me that help make it enjoyable and safe is the lack of roads that come on and off.
Right.
How does that work for the cyclist?
Well, if you go, let's say, down US 1, there's a lot of intersections. And typically intersections are where the conflicts arise between motorists and cyclists. And if you look at on A1A, the only cross street I can think of is at Palmetto Park Road, and that's not really a true intersection. So, yeah, there's no intersections as we think of them in US 1.
How do cyclists get to A1A?
That's an issue. I live maybe about 3/4 of a mile from A1A, and I've lived in this house 23 years and been riding out Palmetto Park Road over the Palmetto Park Bridge out to A1A, and it's frightening. I'm going over the bridge and I hear a car behind me, and I just hope that car's in the other lane. You got to worry about people opening doors, people pulling out, people pulling in, and it's just very nerve-wracking getting from here to A1A.
Right. With Boca Raton's access, there's Camino, there's Palmetto, and Spanish River, and each of those is missing any kind of bike infrastructure in that last half a mile.
Right. No, it's a big issue.
Some people talk about, there were 160 accidents on A1A with bicyclists. Don't you have to go a little bit farther with the numbers to understand the statistic? Yeah,
I used to belong to the Bicycle Advisory Board, and I, for about 7 years, compiled the crash statistics for pedestrians and bicyclists in Boca Raton. And the last year I did it was 2014. There were 7 bicycle motorist crashes on A1A and 70 in the rest of the city. But to be fair, what you have to do is divide, let's say, the 7 crashes by the bicycle miles ridden on A1A, on that segment, in order to normalize the statistics to make a fair comparison. And when you do that, just think about all the bicycle miles that have been ridden there. And to just have 7 crashes in a year is remarkable.
So the better measure is the crashes per mile ridden.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
But there's the miles ridden is very hard to come up with. Very difficult statistic. I don't know of anybody that's compiling it in town. So it's just intuitive. Think about the number of bicyclists out there and the number of miles that are ridden by bicyclists in a year.
Those of us that have ridden A1A are often confronted with these packs of cyclists. They go faster than most people do.
Yeah.
I think they're called pelotons, right?
Exactly. Yep.
And
Yep.
how does that work? Who are these pelotons?
Okay. Generally, it could be like the Boca Raton Bicycle Club having an event. They have rides just about every day somewhere. So it's mainly either a formal organized club or a loose club where people say, hey, we'll get together at 7 o'clock Saturday morning and we'll go out for a ride. And then they basically go out onto A1A and get into a formation. And typically it's a single file, but the lead rider has to basically peel off after maybe about a minute of leading. And he'll come back, and it looks like then there's two columns, but generally that one rider is going to the back, the next rider comes up, and the lead is the one that does all the work because he or she is the one that's getting the wind. In the middle of the pack, there's up to about a 40% efficiency where you're drafting. So that's the whole concept, and there's a social aspect to it too. You're out there with friends and talking, and generally they'll go to some place, Palm Beach or someplace like that, and have coffee. So that's what the pelotons are all about.
Yeah, when I was filming Boca's bike infrastructure, I would often be coming in from the west on something like Palmetto, and while waiting to cross Military, other cyclists would pull up,
Yeah.
and you get to talking, and one fellow was coming in from Coconut Creek just to get to A1A, riding all the way to West Palm, and then taking the Bright Line back.
That's creative.
So it's an amazing route that we have coming through Boca Raton.
Oh, yeah, it is.
And that's another aspect, isn't it? It's not just Boca Raton.
Right.
They're often cycling very long distance.
Yeah, a lot depends on the wind. If you go out onto A1A and the wind's coming from the north, well, generally you'll go north because you want to fight the wind on the way out and then put your sail up on the way back. So it really depends on the wind. But I think most people would prefer to go north.
So what do you want to say to drivers that are maybe on A1A and they're trying to take, caution, but they hit these situations, or they're driving around the city and they see cyclists not really come to a full stop and obey the absolute traffic laws like it's so easy for us to do in a car.
Yeah.
What do you want to tell them having so many miles behind you?
Chill. It's a difficult thing. I think there's the physical part, the safety part, and then there's the emotional part. Like, are these people entitled, to do this? And what I think should happen out on A1A, I think the speed limit should be reduced to 25. And I think there should be better enforcement, not only for motorists, but for cyclists. And at 25, chances are with the bigger pelotons, that's about the same speed as cars. So I think that would work. And then with Vision Zero in the city, I think speed limits are going to have to be reduced anyhow. So I think that's a practical solution.
Right. So, Jim, I noticed you have two bikes in the garage. Yeah. Today we're going to go out and hit A1A on your road bike.
Right.
But you also bike around the city?
Yeah, I have a commuter bike. It's a hybrid. But I take it to the store, to the library, because the road bikes are pretty specialized. You clip into the pedals, and you just can't really use them as commuter bikes. And they're special purpose. You get out on A1A and you hammer. But the hybrid is, I ride that quite a bit for commuting.
So how do you feel getting from point A to point B on the infrastructure we have? Is there something that you would want to tell the city managers or our city officials, like a strategic direction to go with our infrastructure so more people will not get in the car, take those cars off the road, and get on and do things by bike?
Yeah, for BocaFirst, I've been profiling various cities' implementation of Vision Zero. And there's some success stories. Jersey City's successful. They've reduced their fatalities and serious injuries to zero ahead of their goal. And then there's Portland, Oregon. And interestingly enough, Portland has such a wonderful bike infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure. They're missing their goals. And I've been communicating with them, what's going on? And they said, unfortunately, they're hitting the same problem that just about every city in the United States is hitting. And that is things like cars driving too fast, cars themselves. If you look at all the SUVs now, they sit up. So pedestrians are at more risk now because just car design. And what the people in Portland told me is the biggest thing is they are going to have to undergo a major street design and lower speed limits. And I think we're going to have to look at doing the same thing. It's not going to be easy, and but I don't see any way around it.
Right, but that's what it takes to get people out of their cars and onto their bikes.
Right.
And when you reduce the congestion in the Boca Raton area, that reduces the congestion for those that can't ride in because they're coming so far.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's a win for everyone.
Exactly. And I read somewhere where what we should do is basically have our vehicles for when we absolutely need them. And then the rest of the time, take alternate forms of transportation, walking, transit, bicycling. And I think that sort of has to be the attitude. You're not going to get away from motor vehicles. But what we should do is only use them when absolutely necessary. Yeah.
All right, Jim, why don't we go hit the
Let's do
road?
it. Okay, good.